Well, hello and good morning. My name is Sarah Jolene and I'm here making a short video while everybody else is outside and the house is nice and quiet. Anyway, we are here to talk about writing. Now, as you might know, I am a writer and I write both epic fantasy novels and young adult fiction. The young adult fiction is a little bit more on the newer side. I've actually been writing fantasy for many years now, and let's just say that I have picked up a couple of things along the way. Now, I wrote a blog post exactly about what this video is about, so if you would rather just read my blog post instead of listening to me ramble on about this, the link is down in the description below. I completely understand. I ramble a lot. But anyway, today we are going to talk about what you need to know in order to write a fantasy novel. Correction, we're going to talk about what I think you need to know from my several years of experience in writing fantasy. Now, first things first, when I started out writing my books, oh, also, this is Max. He doesn't want to be on the screen. Y'all know Max. Anyway, when I first started writing fantasy, I chose the genre of fantasy because I was scared. I didn't want to write anything else because I did not feel smart enough to write anything else. I didn't feel smart enough about the world around me to be able to write about the world around me. I was very scared of criticism. I was very scared of people telling me I was wrong. Therefore, I decided to go with fantasy because I thought I could get away with pretty much anything if I wrote fantasy because, you know, the sky's the limit, right? Wrong. You see, fantasy is actually one of the most criticized genres in fiction. You see, with all of these fantasy authors out there like J.R.R. Tolkien, George R.R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson, they created entire universes and whole magic systems and even languages. I'm looking at you, J.R.R. Tolkien. And meanwhile, then there's other people like J.K. Rowling and Cassandra Clare who took magic into our own modern world. So let's just say that fantasy is actually quite, there are very high expectations for fantasy novels because of all of the amazing ones that have come out of the genre. I'm gonna put that down. I feel like it's a glare in my glasses, even though there's probably a glare over there too. So when I first started writing fantasy, it was like my way of escape. I thought I could get away with a lot of things. I thought I could avoid criticism completely because who are you to tell me that I'm wrong because this is my world, sort of thing. That's not always true. So, yeah. With fantasy, you gotta do a lot of research. You need to know what you're talking about. Even if you do make up all of this stuff, you need to know what you're talking about. You need to have it planned out. Like these magical systems you come up with, don't wing it. Everybody's gonna know if you wing this little like, oh, they got out of this because this person has this magical power that I forgot to mention. And then they end up never using this magical power again, so it was just, you know, a cop-out. Do not do this. Make it realistic. I know this sounds really like backwards because it's fantasy. It's not supposed to be realistic, but at the same time, there should be a believable amount of realism in it. So do your research, especially if your fantasy novel is set in more of like a medieval era. No swords, no weapons, no fighting techniques, know what you're talking about if you're going into the whole military aspect. Just do at least a little bit of research. If you want enormous help on this specific topic, the topic of like swords and armor and all this other stuff, go check out Shadowversity on YouTube. Did I say his name right? I don't know. He's Australian. I'm Canadian. I probably don't say things right. Go check him out on YouTube. He is amazing. He knows what he's talking about. And actually, he has his own fantasy book. So, yeah. So go check him out, because he's probably a lot better at explaining all of that stuff than I am. I'm not even going to go into it. So another point I made in my blog post was you can't make things up as you go along. I mean, you definitely can. That's pretty much what I did, but it took me about 7 years to write my very first novel in 4 drafts, 4.5 actually. Try not to follow in my footsteps in that way. Plan things. Even if you are a pantser, it is completely okay to have a baseline of just your world itself. Maybe not even the plot of your story, but just know how your world works. Do you have magic in your world? You need to know how it works. Is it hard magic or soft magic? If you don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up, because that's a Brandon Sanderson thing and it makes a lot of sense. You need to know the basics of your world, because people are going to call you out on it. Believe me, they will. Fantasy is one of the most, like, people will read into it so much, and they will nitpick, and they will find all of these things. I mean, look how big Harry Potter became, and how many people just spend a lot of time just going through the books and going through all the lore. And I mean, don't even get me started on the Lord of the Rings, okay? Don't even get me started. Just all of this stuff. If you want to get big, you got to make sure that people can do this to your work and not find too many errors. Who am I to talk? Don't let me scare you away from writing fantasy. Fantasy is awesome to write. It is a lot of fun, but you do need to recognize that it's not as easy and as free, I guess you could say, as people make it out to be. It is one of the most highly criticized genres in fiction. And while I'm on the topic of saying don't wing things, do come up with new things. Like, seriously. There is so much room for new mythical creatures. I mean, aside from dragons, because you always need dragons, absolutely. Just, if you don't have dragons, I don't know what you're doing. But aside from that, I mean, vampires, they're vampires, werewolves, that kind of stuff. It's sort of overdone. If you do use vampires or werewolves, put your own original twist to it, but don't make them sparkly, please. But do come up with new things. Use that creativity inside of you. Come up with new things. I mean, you can use old mythical creatures. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. A lot of great books come out of that. It's fine. But if you want to make your own mythical creatures, do it. I did. I think it went kind of okay. People complain that they can't pronounce the names, but can you pronounce half the names in Greek mythology? I can't even pronounce Greek, or pronounce, or anything. Again, that goes with plot. You are limitless. You can do whatever the heck you want. Just try to make it make sense. Just a little bit. You see, there's a quote that I always love. It's, the difference between reality and fiction is that fiction needs to make sense. Just threw that in there because I really like that quote. I don't know why. It's so funny. I mean, with the world that we live in today, yeah, nothing makes sense. If you tried to write a book about it, people would be so not happy with you because it's like, well, that doesn't make that sense, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, and you're like, it's reality, it's not fiction. It doesn't have to make sense. But fiction does. Apparently. I mean, you can make your book make absolutely no sense. That's on you. One of the biggest things that I would like to mention here is word count. Because I have heard a lot of people criticize word count. A lot of people get upset over it. They're always like, well, you have to stay between 100,000 words and 150,000 words or else it's too long. Publishers will never take it. People won't want to read it. That is a lie. I mean, this is like 5 books put together, but still, people like big books. I like big books. My books are long. My first book is 197,000 words. My second book is probably going to get close to 270,000 words. Don't be afraid to have a long book. Especially when it's your first draft. Just write. Just write. Just go with it. See where the story goes. Editing, you could take out the chopping knives and do all of that. But don't limit yourself with word count. Don't listen to the people who tell you that your word count can't be over this, or it has to stay under this limit, or it has to be more than this. Don't listen to those kinds of people because they're wrong. I let word count limit me for so long, and then I decided I was not going to let it limit me. And now my books are epic. That means that they're super long. But they're also pretty darn good. At least that's what I'm told. But anyway, don't let that limit you. So basically, just for starters, those are the top things that I would tell any fantasy novelist trying to write their first book. Do research, because fantasy is one of the most criticized genres in fiction, and don't be afraid to look around at other fantasy novels and see what other people are doing. Don't wing it. Know what you're doing. At least have a baseline for your world if you're making up a new world, or your magic system if there is one. Don't throw something in there just for the sake of saving your protagonist or causing more pain or whatever. Please don't. People will know when you do that. Don't be afraid to make stuff up in both like your creatures and in your plot, in your world. Go crazy with this. There's no limit to your creativity that comes out of your brain. There's no limit to it. You might think there is, and the only thing that might be stopping it is you. So don't be afraid to reuse old ideas, but come up with new ones as well. Because you might just be the next big Hobbit. Little Hobbit. I don't know. Don't let word count get in the way of your story. Your story doesn't need to be an epic. It doesn't need to be so small that people will read it in a day. It needs to be exactly what your story needs to be. My camera shut off on me, as it does. If you would have rather just watched the blog post that I wrote about this very topic, the link is down in the description below. If you would like to read my epic fantasy novels, again, link down in the description below. If you want to be a part of my mailing list so you can get these videos and you can get these blog posts, you can, there will be a link in the description down below. You will also actually get half of my epic fantasy novel for free if you join my mailing list, which is a pretty sweet deal because that's over 300 pages of content. And it's only half the book. I write epics. And they're epic. So I'm told. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this trip. I hope it made sense. I hope it helped out somehow. And I will see you guys next week. Bye. Bye.